Don't expect us for a moment to take trust which has been shaken in our own defence forces and bequeath that unto forces that hitherto do not actually even exist, such as that word salad of acronyms that I just mentioned.
Israel is being asked to trust in the system. I actually agree with that. And I'm actually, as an American citizen, emboldened by that trust. Isn't saying trust the United Nations, it's saying trust the United States.
The idea that we could somehow bring a perfect peace under this rubric to the Gaza Strip, which is host to perhaps the most radicalized people on the face of the earth, to me is truly the stuff of fantasy. It strikes me that this disarmament plan really appears to have been written by a 6-year-old inhabitant of Candyland, where unicorns and fairies are the only inhabitants of the area around that individual, and where there are no real problems whatsoever. It is completely and utterly detached from reality. And I want to give a couple of points, and then we can have a back and forth about it. And as you predicted, and as I said at the beginning of my response, I'm very, very pessimistic about the virtue of any of this. First of all, within this agreement is a call for the self-determination and statehood, presumably, although it doesn't actually say so, of the Palestinian Arabs. I oppose that. I think that any people, and it was the people, as well as the Nukhba forces, as well as the Hamas forces, as well as Palestinian Islamic Jihad, it was also Gazan civilians, any people who behaved the way that they did on October 7th and in various public rounds of events such as hostage releases subsequent to October 7th, that people is disqualified from statehood. Disqualified from statehood. They are not deserving of a state. The international community should not provide them with the means and methods of having a state, and the state of Israel should never permit what is very likely to become a failed terror state to be established on our borders, whether inside Gaza or inside Judea and Samaria. So the suggestion that all of this should culminate in self-determination and statehood for the Palestinian Arabs fills me with horror and with dread. Now, politically, thankfully, I don't believe, John, there's any Israeli leader now or any Israeli politician, and obviously Israel's right in the throes of election season with those elections taking place on October 27th of this year. No leader in the Israeli political sphere can advocate for the establishment of a Palestinian state at this time. Rightly so, long may that continue. So this is completely detached from reality politically as well within Israel. The last couple of things that I'm going to mention are, it again, John, and I don't mean any offense to you as an American, because I realize this is part of the American lexicon, right? But it again is replete with this endless stream of completely substance-free acronyms that to me mean less than nothing. I'll give you just a rattling off of a few of those. The International Verification Committee that you just mentioned, it has an acronym, the IVC. What is the IVC? What will that look like? We have no idea, but we're expected as Israelis to trust it. It includes, incidentally, that verification committee, representatives from Qatar and from Turkey. Maybe they will be present, maybe they won't in the ultimate standing up of this apparition, but that is the case at the moment. In addition to that, we've of course got the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, the NCAG, something else we don't really know what it means. The Board of Peace, that one's appropriately abbreviated to BOP, B-O-P, the Board of Peace, and the International Stabilization Force, the ISF. Now, this endless stream of nonsensical and completely unproven acronyms that are supposed to suggest some sort of security for the Israeli people, these all should be dismissed on their face. And the reason is, if the Israeli people saw the complete failure of the Israel Defense Forces on October 7th, and we did, tragically we did, the fight back was something to behold. But the horrors of October 7th constituted a terrible failure on our part. Don't expect us for a moment to take trust which has been shaken in our own defense forces and bequeath that unto forces that hitherto do not actually even exist, such as that word salad of acronyms that I just mentioned. Two last points about specific clauses, John. It says in clause 6 of this agreement that Gaza, I'm quoting here, shall be governed according to the principle of one authority, one law, one weapon. You mentioned that in your opening comments. John, I know places in the United States, and I know places in Israel, and I know places in Britain where we haven't brought about this utopia of the principle, the implementation of the principle of one authority, one law, one weapon. We see gangland killings all over the place. We see mobland killings all over the place. The idea that we could somehow bring a perfect peace under this rubric to the Gaza Strip, which is host to perhaps the most radicalized people on the face of the earth, to me is truly the stuff of fantasy. And I don't know why I'm expected to put any faith into that notion at all. With regard to the police force that you spoke about, you know, and I know, that prior to Hamas taking power, the Palestinian Authority was in charge. And the Palestinian Authority inside Gaza was kneecapped, bullets were fired into the back of their heads, and they were thrown off the top of buildings. I don't think that a police force armed with tasers and truncheons and even light weapons is going to be able to stand up to the murderous ambitions of Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or any other evolution of those organizations. And the final clause I want to get into is clause number 8, John. Of course, feel free to come back on any of this or none of it, whichever you feel is more important. The process to decommission and store heavy weapons, military production sites, depots of weapons, and tunnels is something that is highlighted in clause 8 of this agreement. The process to decommission and store heavy weapons, military production sites, depots of weapons, and tunnels. This, again, is completely irresponsible. It is a fanciful ambition and a completely false notion. If weapons are stored anywhere inside the Gaza Strip, Hamas will raid those stores at a time of its choosing. And any force that constitutes the stabilization force or the verification committee or anybody else will flee. That is what will happen. And a final point about this, and I know that you have rightly highlighted there's been some movement on what will be decommissioned and what won't. I remind all of our listeners, John, that of course, the vast majority of the terrible damage, carnage and murder that took place on October 7th, that was carried out by light weapons. That was carried out by machine guns. That was carried out by sidearms. There were some shoulder-mounted rocket-propelled grenades that were fired there, but it's carried out predominantly by light weapons. And therefore, the idea that Hamas will decommission its larger arms, many of which have been destroyed by Israel anyway, to me is null and void and unimportant. So we do have a bit of a disagreement, John. What do you say to that? What do you say in other senses?
Well, thank you, Benjamin. I always love our conversations of the back and forth. I actually want to address all of it, and I'll try to do it quickly. On the first point of trust, I actually do believe, one, we're in uncharted territory. What is the Gaza Strip? It is not nation. It's not nation building. I view it as community building and stabilization, de-radicalization, just really altering something that is there are principles of what has worked in the past in any like scenario that are being applied, and I see that. But you asked, Israel is being asked to trust in the system. I actually agree with that. And I'm actually, as an American citizen, emboldened by that. Trust isn't saying trust the United Nations. It's saying trust the United States. It's called the President Trump 20-point peace plan. And if I try to remove all politics, there's a reason for that. You have this U.S. administration putting their skin in the game and actually being the glue and the trust behind it. So the answer is yes, you are being asked to trust the United States and its subsidiary personnel, not the United Nations, not this country, name the country, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, being handed the Gaza Strip and saying, you fix it. There actually is a glue behind that. So I actually do agree. And I don't want to be cynical, but to push back a little bit, if Israel wasn't willing to occupy the Gaza Strip and to take over security, governance, and services, which they're not for many reasons, and we've had that conversation, then you do have to trust And I actually think of the scenarios that I could imagine, a UN Security Council resolution directing this operation with the United States, the only superpower on the planet, backing and mitigating, even when there is a bad plan put forward, mitigating, going, okay, we're going to step in here. What's being said, what's going to actually happen, as Israel is not being asked to take one step back until there is actual real security. And Israel, which is the paradigm shift, has the right to eliminate any threat it sees based on its intelligence. So I believe that trust is there. The second point about self-determination and statehood, I actually agree with you on this, the likelihood, but it's the word before that, path to self-determination and statehood. That is, of course, the Saudi Arabia and all other countries kind of wording requirement that, sure, a generation, whatever, in the future. But the self-determination is that Palestinian self community-based leadership, all of that I believe, but I warranted the monopoly of violence. So you talked about weapons, who controls. It is about monopoly of violence. It is very basic on who controls the majority of the monopoly of violence. As I travel the world, there are a lot of places that the state or whoever is the actual government doesn't control it. It is controlled by gangs. I do believe, though, even though with October 7th, the fact that 4,000 rockets, 20,000 short-range rockets were in Gaza is a failure. And so beyond the light weapons, those 20,000 short to medium range or short-range rockets, although not accurate, can't ever be allowed to wage. And I point you to, again, analogies are only as good as the context in which they apply. They can't have the means to wage war in any sense of the matter, and the only people who have a monopoly of violence and the arms, which will be difficult. But this is actually, I actually have optimism because of how visiting every location, you can control it. You can be the monopoly of violence, and you can clear. I actually lastly, Benjamin, I view after visits.
Wait, John, just finish that thought. You can actually clear. You were in the middle of your sentence
Yeah,
there.
you can actually clear, which is what I saw, like in starting with the easier problem for an international stabilization force to enter is you clear an area that we've talked about before called the Disneyland theory, and you do this bite by bite while Israel holds their security like they have the right to. And as the forces not in the way are clearing an area, a community is established, and then you do it what should have been done a long time ago, and you get rid of the past thinking. Although, yes, you're right as an Israeli to say, we've heard this before, we've seen this before, but actually this is something that's never been tried, and you can clear areas, you can secure, and you can become the monopoly of violence and verify every day. Don't put a wall up and just hope for good things to happen. You can actually control a lot of this. That aspect, I saw it, what's happening, and I am actually enheartened by the forward progress